The house lay shrouded in a hushed stillness, shadows stretching like long fingers across every corner. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she moved stealthily down the hallway towards her nephew, Ethan's room. A wave of guilt washed over her, but it was quickly overtaken by the forbidden desire that pulsed through her veins. She couldn't deny the undeniable attraction that had blossomed between them. Every shared glance, every inadvertent touch, had ignited a spark, building an almost unbearable tension. Tonight, she wouldn't fight it any longer. With a trembling hand, she pushed open the door, holding her breath as she peered inside. The room was bathed in the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting an ethereal sheen over Ethan as he slept soundly in his bed. He looked so peaceful, sprawled on his back with one arm resting above his head, his chest rising and falling with each steady breath. Sarah's pulse quickened as she observed him, taking in every detail of his youthful physique, the broadness of his shoulders, the way his shirt stretched across his chest, the faint shadow of stubble along his jawline. A pang of hesitation struck her, but it was fleeting. Something deep within her, a primal urge, propelled her forward. Her eyes traced the contours of his body beneath the sheets, and a wave of heat flushed her skin. There was no turning back now. Silently, she slipped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She stood at the foot of his bed for a moment, her gaze fixed on him, drinking in the sight of his unguarded vulnerability. Then, with a mix of trepidation and determination, she climbed onto the mattress. Her movements were slow and deliberate as she settled beside him. Leaning closer, she whispered his name, her breath warm against his ear. "Ethan!" He stirred slightly, his head turning towards her, but he didn't awaken. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat against the silence of the night. The thrill of seeing him like this, completely unaware of her presence, sent a shiver down her spine. She lowered her head, her lips hovering inches from his cheek, and pressed a feather-light kiss to his skin. He murmured softly in his sleep, his lips parting slightly as if in response to her touch. Sarah's breath hitched. Slowly, she trailed kisses along his jawline, growing bolder as she moved down to his neck. The warmth of his skin beneath her lips, the subtle scent of his cologne, sent her senses reeling. She couldn't resist, sliding her hand up his chest, her fingers lightly tracing the contours of his muscles. A dangerous glint flickered in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the forbidden desire that hung heavy in the air. I wasn't ready to face it, to name the yearning that had taken root within me. Suddenly overwhelmed, I excused myself, fleeing to the sanctuary of the bathroom. I needed a moment to breathe, to escape the intoxicating pull of his presence, to regain control of my spiraling emotions. I splashed cool water on my face, staring into the mirror, searching for answers in the reflection that gazed back at me. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I was older, wiser. He was my best friend's son, practically a child in my eyes, yet I couldn't extinguish the flames of attraction that licked at my senses. It was as if a dormant part of me had awakened, a primal yearning that defied all reason and logic. As I grappled with my tumultuous thoughts, a soft knock startled me. Before I could respond, the door creaked open, revealing him standing in the doorway, his gaze intense and unwavering. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat echoing the chaos within me. I was speechless, unable to articulate the emotions swirling within me. He remained silent, his eyes holding mine captive, waiting for me to break the spell. Time seemed to warp and distort. I knew I should send him away, create distance before we tumbled over the precipice, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen, paralyzed by his nearness. With each step he took towards me, the air crackled with anticipation. My pulse quickened, and a blush crept up my neck. He entered the bathroom, closing the door behind him with a soft click that echoed the finality of my surrender. I should have protested, reminded him of the boundaries we were crossing, but the words caught in my throat. My mind was a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts, while my body betrayed me with its undeniable response to his presence. His touch was featherlight, a mere graze of his fingers against my arm, yet it sent shivers down my spine, igniting a fire within me. I don't think we should, I managed to whisper. The words a feeble attempt to deny the truth that blazed in my eyes. I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame, poised on the brink of a dangerous precipice, ready to fall, and then the world shifted on its axis. He was so close. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. My mind screamed at me to resist, to escape the forbidden allure of his touch, but my body had a will of its own. I was caught in a whirlwind of desire, powerless to resist the magnetic force that pulled us together. He remained silent, and so did I. Words were unnecessary, superfluous in the charged atmosphere. We both understood the unspoken desires that hung heavy between us, the forbidden longing that neither of us dared to name. The silence crackled with unspoken truths, a symphony of unvoiced emotions. My heart pounded like a drum, each beat a reminder of the dangerous territory we were treading. The air in the bathroom was thick with tension, a palpable force that bound us together. His hand brushed against mine, an accidental touch, yet it ignited a fire within me. I remained motionless, frozen by the intensity of the moment. He reached for me again, slowly, hesitantly, as if testing the waters, gauging my reaction. I didn't resist. I couldn't. A part of me screamed at me to stop this madness, to extinguish the flames before they consumed us both. But another part, a darker, more reckless part, reveled in the thrill of the forbidden. I knew the dangers, the irreversible consequences that lay ahead, yet they seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the overwhelming desire that surged through me. All the reasons why this was wrong, all the potential pain and heartbreak, vanished from my mind. All I could focus on was him, his intense gaze, his touch, the way my body thrummed with a life of its own under his attention. I inhaled deeply, seeking a steadiness that eluded me. The tension between us only intensified, stretching taut like a tightly wound spring. He took another step closer, his hands sliding up my arms, sending shivers of electricity down my spine. For a fleeting moment, I surrendered to the sensation, leaning into his touch, reveling in the warmth of his body, the intoxicating heat of the moment. I wanted him. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, undeniable and overwhelming. But just as quickly, a wave of guilt crashed over me. This wasn't just any man. This was my best friend's son, someone I had known and cared for since he was a child, someone who trusted me implicitly. If I succumbed to this temptation, I would shatter that trust, and the guilt would haunt me forever. I pulled back slightly, breaking the spell. He looked at me, confusion clouding his features, his eyes searching mine for an explanation, for a heartbeat. I considered giving in, letting the moment sweep us away. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. "We can't," I whispered, the words barely audible. "This isn't right." He remained motionless, speechless, his hands hovering near mine, the unspoken question lingering in the air. He stood there, frozen, as if pleading with me to change my mind, but I couldn't. No matter how fiercely my desires raged within me, I couldn't let this happen. I forced myself to step back, creating a chasm between us. The spell broke. The tension dissipated like smoke in the wind. The heat that had been building between us evaporated, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. Disappointment clouded his eyes, mingled with confusion, and a pang of guilt pierced my heart. But I knew I had done the right thing. I had to stop this before it spiraled into something we could never undo. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the apology a tangled knot of emotions. Regret for the forbidden longing, remorse for the near transgression, and a desperate plea for understanding. He mirrored my retreat, his expression softening, a flicker of comprehension replacing the confusion. He didn't speak, but his eyes conveyed a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding that this was for the best. We both knew that this path, this forbidden attraction, could only lead to destruction. An awkward silence descended upon us, the weight of the almost committed act hanging heavy in the air. I searched for words to break the tension, to bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened between us. Before I could speak, he broke the silence. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice steady and reassuring. "It's okay," I replied, though the words felt hollow. The truth was, I didn't know how to navigate this turmoil, how to reconcile my feelings with the reality of our situation. But I knew I had to try, to bury the forbidden desires that threatened to consume me. "I should go," I murmured, unable to bear the weight of his presence any longer. The memory of our near transgression too fresh, too raw. He didn't try to stop me, simply stepping aside to let me pass. A pang of regret, or perhaps something more, pierced my heart as I fled the bathroom. My mind raced, replaying the events that had just transpired. But amidst the turmoil, I clung to the knowledge that I had made the right decision. I had to escape before I succumbed to the temptation, before I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Leaving the house did little to quell the storm within me. The memory of our encounter haunted me, the forbidden fruit of our desire forever dangling just out of reach. I couldn't help but wonder, what if I hadn't stopped? What if I had surrendered to the temptation? But deep down, I knew the answer. It would have been a catastrophic mistake, one that could have cost me my friendship, my peace of mind, everything I held dear. Despite the lingering tension, the unanswered questions, I knew I had made the right choice by walking away. The days that followed were a torment. I couldn't escape the memory of that moment in the bathroom, his face, his touch, the magnetic pull between us. I avoided my best friend's house, desperate to create distance, to extinguish the flames of my forbidden desire. But the memories lingered, a constant reminder of my near transgression. I knew I had to regain control. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my friendship, about the trust that had been placed in me. I couldn't allow a moment of weakness to destroy everything. Eventually, I saw him again. The tension was still there, a subtle undercurrent beneath the surface, but it was different. I had made my choice, and I knew that any fleeting pleasure wasn't worth the devastating consequences. We never spoke of what had happened, and I could sense that he too had moved on. As difficult as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. Some lines are not meant to be crossed. A part of me will always wonder, what if? But I also know that walking away was the only choice I could live with. Now tell me, have you ever found yourself caught in a similar situation? How did you handle the temptation? What advice would you give to someone struggling with forbidden desires?